case on the channel.
Yeah.
Is it recording? Yes. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Turing Way Book Dash Share Out. This is our third day of the Book Dash. We have done a slightly shorter Book Dash this time. We've had 2 days of, I suppose, book dashing, I suppose I'll call it, working together very collaboratively and also having some fantastic social sessions as well. I'm Emma Caroon. I'm a principal researcher at the Alan Turing Institute and one of the members of the Book Dash working group and planning committee. We're going to have some other chairs as well, so I'll let them introduce themselves when they're speaking, and also just ask that anyone who's going to share out their work in the Book Dash also introduces themselves when they start doing their share outs. What we're here to do today is, as I said, we are going to celebrate all of the great work that has gone on in our Book Dash this week. I think what we're planning to do is go straight to our share outs. I don't think we need to hang around. And as I said, we will just introduce ourselves as we go through. So I'm going to, who is first on here? I'm going to look down on our shared document. I'm checking with Lele. I've done a very short introduction, is that okay?
Yes, this is an excellent introduction. I noticed that only by accident I am the first person in the shadow.
I know, that's what I was going to say. So I suppose I should stay chair while you do your introduction. And what we do is we go through people share out what they've done in the Book Dash. So they will highlight some issues that they've put on our GitHub repository and some pull requests. They might also share their screen, so please feel free to do that and actually show the work that you've been doing. So there might be a preview in the book. There might even be a live merge if someone wants to merge something into the book. That can also happen in the share out. But I would encourage everybody else in our Zoom room to actually think about some questions that they want to ask the person who's sharing out, and also the person sharing out might have some asks as well, because usually what happens in the Book Dash is you finish some of the work, but you've still got a little bit to do. So you might want to just encourage people to collaborate and work with you further after the Book Dash in coming to things like our collaboration cafe or our next Book Dash to work on these particular issues and pull requests that you've been working on. Okay, so first up is Lele. So I'll hand over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Lele Demerci and I'm a project manager for the Turing Way. I started approximately 6-7 months ago, so this is my second Book Dash, and if I'm being honest, the first one that I know what I'm doing. So if this has been your first Book Dash and you didn't make as much progress as you thought you would, this is completely normal and usually takes some time to find your way around the resources and finding meaningful ways to contribute. Having said that, the Turing Way book has developed very organically and the contributions were coming from many different directions. This is not a handbook that is meant to be read cover to cover, but it has all the different resources that different profiles of people may need. So we have created pathways in the book for early career researchers or project leads or research software engineers to be able to find their way through the resources and have a curated adventure within the book. So last week during the collaborations workshop, we came up with the idea of curating some pathways for community management. You may be aware that the Turing Way is now undergoing a transition in its governance model, and we have established a community management working group, and in which I am part of. And if you want to be part of, please reach out to me and I will loop you in. So we started finding all the resources in the book to be able to onboard the community management working group members. So last week we created one pathway that was on research community management concepts and more like the overview and the content that the project manager a community manager needs to be aware of in order to be able to do their job. So this week I spent some time working on another pathway, which is the operational side of community management. How you start a repository, how you communicate with people, how you establish ways of working, what you need to keep in mind in terms of communications. As of last night, I think I'm pretty ready for a review and merge, but before I get started, let me share my screen because I think that will make more understandable what I'm talking about. So here on our sidebar, we have the pathways, and we have already opened the research community management table of contents, so you can go through the guides and find the resources that are more relevant to your line of work. And now I need to find some other screen where I have the deploy ready so that we can have a look in the pull request that I was working on this week. Give me 1 second to be able to pull that up. Chaos of tabs on my browsers and windows. Let me find the deploy. Is it here? No. I shouldn't have volunteered to go first.
Don't worry.
But that's where we are. Yes, found it. The major part of this work was happening on a YAML file, which was a little bit difficult for me to navigate. So I'm super thankful for all the people that were troubleshooting my "this is not working again" kind of complaints throughout the week. Okay, now this is the old preview. So here is a better version. I still have to do one last fix here to add one parent folder. And then these are the curated resources that you might find useful for operational community management. And what do I need to share? Hopefully during today, I will have some time to fix this and we will be able to do a live merge in the evening section. So stay tuned.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And let me put all the links in the chat as well. They are also in the shared document in case you want to have a quick review before we finalize this.
Thank you, Lily. And is your ask, sorry, have you finished?
Yes, I have finished. My ask is please review. Let me know if there are any other resources that you think are missing from the current table of contents. And I will have fine-tuned the structure by today, so hopefully we can have a minutes later.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Lily. And I want to encourage people to give everyone a round of applause for all their hard work. Brilliant. And has anyone got any questions for Lily? No.
No me.
I
actually have a question.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So did you, while you were curating the operational list, the pathway, was there anything that jumped out that we don't have in the Turing Way? Because I know last week when we started doing this work at the collaborations workshop, we did talk about this being also an exercise to find the things that actually we could still write about in the Turing Way. So did you have time to think about that?
If I'm being honest, not really, or not in depth. However, I do feel like when we started this work and very soon down the line, we realized that we needed to disambiguate between the concepts of community management and the more operational side of it, that came about pretty organically. So now I think at least in terms of the Turing Way community handbook, everything, every best practice that we have implemented and embedded in the community, it is already documented there. If there are other aspects of operations in community management that we could think to include down the line, I guess I will spend some time thinking about it before applying to my next book test.
Brilliant, that's a good answer. So yeah, I suppose that's another ask, is for people to look at the list and also think about where the gaps are and things that we could actually fill in. Thank you so much, Lele.
I can take
brilliant.
over.
Thank you
from
so
now.
much. I was going to say, take over, please take over chairing, and then I can be quiet.
And our next participant is Alexandra, which will share all the work she has been doing with the Scriberia images and alt texts this past book test. So over to you, Ale.
Well, yes, I was working on, my contribution is not huge, but at least I spent some time trying to find all the alt text that we had written in the past. And we work collaboratively with Reshama and Sebastián Ayala. And actually they are the ones who are doing an amazing job, because we started a YAML live directory. YAML is like for the ones, I didn't know what it was, so to me it was very important to understand it, but it's a system that allows for coding to create a system. So Reshama started the directory, but I found all the data that we could use to put it in the YAML. So I have in our GitHub repository added an issue where you can find a spreadsheet with everything, like all the alt text that we had done in the past there. Reshama and Sebastián have created the YAML directory. So if anyone wants to collaborate on this, you can start adding more content into the YAML directory directly. Based on, if you want to do from scratch, you can also do it. But if not, you can just go to our directory, to the file where we already have some content about the alt text. And also review if the tags are the ones that you think are appropriate, because the next phase has been taken by Sebastián, who has already created a MIST library. And so hopefully from this book dash, we will have, hello, and Malvika is here. We will have a way to find our images in a better way through tags and with the alt text. So yeah, although I didn't contribute a lot, I am extremely grateful for Sebastián and Reshama, because they have done an amazing job. So yeah, that's all on me. I have added both the issue and the 2 pull requests. I saw that Sebastián's pull request was merged, I think by Sarah just now. So it's great. Hopefully this is gonna be a great thing for all. I think we all love the Scriberia images, so this is great. Yeah, that's it. That's all of me.
It looks amazing.
It looks amazing, no?
Yeah, like
It's all Sebastián, huh? Like, whoa, what a great job.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. We will all be, something, just, this is like a note for me. I think this is the first time that we don't have a Scriberia in a long time. So I think we were all like super sad, but in a way, we change our sad feelings, but make a system to get better use of all the images that we have. So this is a good way of our, like, I don't know, taking care of our community.
Managing the images.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Our data management.
I find this fascinating also because I feel like this book test has a little bit of a retrospective feeling. Instead of writing in new resources and new chapters and new content, we really spend some time, like looking back and historically readdressing little gaps we have found within the book, which is great. And I know that Ale needs no introductions, but for the purposes of the recording, if you would like to,
Oh, yes.
maybe also include that.
Well, I am Alexandra Rojo Alvarez. I am the Senior Research Community Manager for Bridge AI based at the Alan Turing Institute. I I remember we used to do this. I'm wearing a blue shirt and I have a face full of freckles. And that's it. That's me. And this is my 5th book dash.
Wow. Any questions from online or in the room?
There is a question in the shared. Oh, God, Andre, you go.
So just me see if I understood. So now we have a gallery, we can browse the images and the descriptions are also there, and there are tags you can browse using the tags. How does it work using the tags to find them?
You will have, I mean, there is, not all images are right now there. So we're working with the ones that we had already had in alt text. We had to prioritize. So we're using the alt text that some other collaborators have used in the past. And we put some tags, keywords that you could like to search. And then once you put the keywords there, you will see some,
But they're not part of the alt text.
the keywords not necessarily.
So it's
but-
part of metadata.
No, it's on the metadata, that's what, okay, so.
But
the
because
alt text
maybe
is
what
still
people
kind of
were
appears as
not
it is.
complaining, but what was challenging for most of us is that there are so many images on Zenodo that every time you needed an image, you take ages reviewing.
Yeah, it's very
So
hard.
we
Like,
wanted to,
Trying to find them.
I mean, I have a collection since the first book dash in my own laptop and I go through it. But it's not the most efficient way to do it, right? And it's very subjective too, like. And also it would become something that people start adding tags that they think this image represents.
I think we need to do that on another stage, like we need to show people how to add more content to the YAML directory as well, like so anyone can, because we have long alt text, short alt text, and tag like keywords. But I'm sure that that's very subjective, like what I think it's important, maybe Mika doesn't, so we need to make sure that maybe in the next book dash, we expand or we teach people how to collaborate on that.
Well, you say that, but someone has put a very good question in, I think it must be Richard, because it's in pink, has put a question about, has something been added to the community handbook about adding alt text to this YAML file? So that can, if there is a chapter in the Turing Way about how to do it, then it will be done.
That's amazing. That's a very good suggestion, and it should be action after this book dash. But
Yeah.
it's definitely something worth working on.
So yeah, that's a to-do list thing.
I love that. I think there is already some paragraph somewhere in the accessibility guide about writing alt text.
Yeah.
But now I think it would be
Yeah.
super helpful to have a step-by-step guide on doing it in the YAML files.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Congratulations, Ale. And if there are if there are no other questions online, we will move to the next contribution, which will be Richard.
Hello, I'm just going to try sharing my screen. There we go. Okay. So, hello, everyone. I'm Richard. I'm a camera-shy, disembodied voice, so you won't actually see me if you want the visual description. I am the data outputs manager for a research consortium called the Human Developmental Biology Initiative, and I've been working on a contribution with respect to the sort of question of understanding computational reproducibility and some of the limitations of that. It's something I think about in the background of what I do for a while, and my interest in provenance of information and so on. So then I opened this issue, looks like back in November of 2023. So I've been thinking about this for a while. At various points in book dashes between now and then, I've added various points related to this question to a new sort of subchapter inside the reproducible compute environments section of the book dash. And I now have this pull request ready for review with sort of an outline of what I've added there. This has ended up being largely a discussion of the merits of an approach to managing computational environments called functional package management. As that seems to address many of the limitations that exist with using virtual machines and containers and conventional package managers. So anyone who has expertise in the use of the existing technologies, so like Docker and virtual machines and package management in general, who wants to give me a technical review of this would be very welcome. I thanks very much to Ariel, who's already given me a bunch of comments on format fixes and additional commas. My sentences are too long. Yes, any kind of content-based review would be most welcome before that gets merged in. At the moment, this is the build preview on the site. So it's set in here at reproducible compute environments, and it's broken down into a few different sections about these approaches. So fortunately, it lined up quite nicely for all the references that I just added the other day with something I was working on at the Software Sustainability Institute Collaborations workshop on advice for writing reproducible research software with the discussion group there. So I pulled a bunch of common references. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks very much.
This is amazing, Richard. I feel like maybe on the more technical side for me to comprehend, but if I have one question, would be, since you're working on a PR for so long, how do you feel revisiting these updates for an extended period of time changed how you regarded some of the themes or issues that you're describing in the chapter?
I learned a fair bit about some of these technologies and their sort of relative merits and the actual complexities of using them in practice at various points along the way. So that's changed a little bit of some of the detail of what I put in, but some of the broad strokes were pretty similar. I'm trying to remember now how much I actually iterated on this during that time. I put something up a while back, and then I think it has 3 major rounds of revisions. A sort of first initial draft, a structure update, which gave us broadly what I have today, and then yesterday some updates to that. First pass reading back through it yesterday, I think I know I was initially a little skeptical of the decision I'd made about the structure, but then when I finished reading, I thought, oh, actually, I prefer the structure to what I was thinking about revising it to. So, so yeah, I've gone back and forth a little bit on some things, but long-running PRs occasionally lead you to technical issues with merging them back in when things change. So if your facility with Git is not spectacular, then I would suggest trying to keep your changes as particularly local. So maybe even just don't bother changing stuff in the some of the contents and so on. Just like work on the content, then add in the technical bits towards the end would be my suggestion. Just as a quick pro tip.
This makes a lot of sense as a pipeline for work. I see that in the shared notes, before I pass the word to Malvika that has a question, is that a suggestion that to tag someone from the infrastructure group like Jim or Sarah to be able to review the more technical aspects of this chapter. And
that's an excellent suggestion. Yeah.
I have been thinking a lot about making resources findable, and the more we build, the more chapters go inside a chapter, and they go under like a very big list of sub-chapters. Maybe Richard, can you help us think about some of the pathways that could be, basic reproducibility to advanced reproducibility to something else, because what you have written is, it would be very hard for someone to find if they're not looking for it, but what's in there is very, very helpful for people to learn about. It's just leaving an idea with you.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point, because I haven't yet labeled it with any pathways information, and I think that would be a useful addition, and perhaps some of the prior reading suggestions, so that there's some metadata that it's a good idea for me to add. Yep, thank you.
Sorry, I can't be taking notes and sharing at the same time. Too much multitasking for me. So I can get back to this in a second. This is amazing work, Richard, and super inspiring.
Yeah.
It would be really great if we could get that finalized before the next books, before the next book test. Jesus, Lele. Are there any other questions for Richard online or in person? I don't see any hands. So, congratulations, Richard.
Thank you.
And over to Emma and her peers.
Hello again, everybody. So I did two things during the book dash. The first was I made like a mega issue about the alt text in the book. So what I wanted to achieve was I wanted to manually go through all of the chapters, look at all of the alt text and pick out the links for the images, so the chapter links for the images that needed improving, for the alt text needed improving. So I made an issue where I went through all of the guides and I did that. In the last book dash, we basically did the reproducibility guide, so I knew I didn't have to do that. So I went through sort of manually and sort of listed them in this issue. What amazingly happened, which is a real book dash thing, is somebody picked up this issue and they started going through the issue and actually improving the alt text. So if you look at the issue, then Cecilia actually, she wanted to do some tasks which would teach her how to use our workflow. So we spent a bit of time on Tuesday morning working together and going through how to do the workflow. And then she got really in the whole vibe of doing it. And then yesterday I was continuously pinged in her PRs with all the alt text. So I think she's done quite a lot of it, but there is still some to do. The way we worked, we made it a tick box list. So if you do one of them, make sure you tick it off in the issue, so we know it's done. But essentially, we now know which images that are in the book still need their alt text improving, because there is a full list there. So so I'm really glad I achieved that and that Cecilia actually started doing it. So one of my asks is please go and look at that issue and start improving the alt text. That still needs to be done. And then the second thing I did, I had, like Richard, I had a PR that had been open for quite a long time. So a couple of book dashes ago, that I've been working on with Cassandra, who hasn't come to this book dash, but she's actually been working with me asynchronously on this week. And this was about the research community management, or the community management chapter in the collaborations guide. We wanted to update it because in the Turing community management team, we've written a paper. We wanted to update it with some of our new thoughts and actually add in some more links in there. And most of that work we actually did in the last book dash. So actually I spent some time on Tuesday and yesterday just finalising those edits, which actually Cass had done the edits, so I was actually the checker reviewer. I had to do the sort of technical bits and pieces like putting in references, like making sure it actually looked right and things like that. And the bit of writing that I did was I actually have written a personal story about being a community manager, which now is in there. But I also want to highlight that Cass is writing a personal story, and also Lena, who joins us from the Netherlands. Does she work at Amsterdam University? As a community manager, has also written a really lovely personal story, but in the last book dash. She hasn't come to this book dash, so we weren't able to finish it, but I managed to merge the changes to the RCM chapter, so those are in the book now. My personal story is in the book. I've also opened a new PR to bring in other people's personal stories in shortly, hopefully. So yeah, I'm excited to have actually finished it, because that is 3 book dash worth It actually isn't a huge change, but it's just taken a long time to do it. So that's the general story of book dashes, I think, of the Turing Way. That new chapter, or it wasn't a new chapter, edits need to be done. So it was very much in the same vibe as Lely was saying, that we're actually like re-editing things and updating things, which I think is definitely the theme of this this book dash. Yeah, thanks.
I love this chapter. I'm taking some time to scroll and read through, and I am pretty sure that I will be updating to include this in my pathway before.
I think it's
the
in there.
TBD.
It should be in there because we haven't changed it's not a new chapter, it's just a re-edit. So
I have a feeling that these stories will get a lot more people to share their stories.
yeah, the other thing that actually, because Cass and I was saying Cass was working asynchronously with me because she wasn't part of the book dash, but one of the things we did talk about was because we've already got these 3 stories really that need to go in there, and did we add them as separate files or do we add them as one file? Because we decided that we're not going to add them as separate stories because it doesn't then it doesn't go with the flow of the other infrastructure overview chapters and personal
I have a
stories.
suggestion.
So yeah.
You could probably follow the contributors.md file, how it's displayed in the group of contributors. So we can add as many stories as we want, but index the names of these people so we can browse the
that's a
stories
good
like that.
idea. Yeah.
Also,
We didn't know if we could make them like a sub chapter. Do you know?
You
Is
can
there
make-
another?
you
We
can
can.
make,
Oh, maybe
yeah.
we'll do that
and
then. Yeah.
that third nesting is possible.
Okay.
We avoid that as much as possible because then
It's hard to find, isn't it?
find.
Yeah.
The second thing is that when we wrote the book, we wrote lots of case studies that are on our repo, but not in the paper. I think they could be added as well as
That's true.
in there, like they're
Yeah.
already there.
Yeah, that's true. We can have them. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so we've still got a bit of formatting to do for those personal stories, but yeah, they should go in shortly. I think.
I personally find this piece of work super fascinating because it really takes down barriers of, like knowledge, because when you hear research community manager, you don't really know what it entails, and having the personal stories of people and all the walks of life to end up being a part of this team is super helpful and inspiring for people on the outside to, try to find their way around.
And they're all very different, I think. Yeah. So
And
all-
also in terms of advocacy as well,
Yeah.
because it at the bottom line, it is a matter of representation. How, if you cannot see how far you can go, you cannot imagine it there. Congratulations, Emma.
Thank you. Sorry, all the rustling is Malvika trying to get a pastry. So sorry, online people.
Being greedy.
Lovely. Should we move on to Patricia?
Yeah, thank you, Lele. So I'm Patricia. I was part of the core delivery team that kicked off the Turing Way and took part in the book dash in November 2022, and was part of the group that organized this one. So it seems like I'm just contributing to the Turing Way every 2 years approximately with something, and which means I have to remind myself what I'm doing, which also means my contributions in actually getting stuff done and written aren't great, because I struggle to switch into writing mode, and actually contribute a lot of text, or like well-written text. The things that I aim to contribute is an edit to the chapter on road mapping based on a workshop that I was invited to facilitate for the Turing Way Practitioners Hub earlier this year, and I think the resources that Ariel, Malvika, and I created for that one are actually really good, and they should be linked from that chapter. So what I did is just create an issue planning out what I want to do, and I started writing something that is a work in progress pull request. But I think my contributions are less to like there's actually new content in the Turing Way, but somehow I ended up facilitating some of the social sessions, and I led what was a really fun but also chaotic and definitely didn't go to plan scavenger hunt on Tuesday, which was really wonderful. And I put some reflections on what I would do differently in the issue where we planned the whole thing. So maybe at some point that should become a chapter in like social events that you run for your or social sessions that you might want to run as part of your virtual event. Based on that, we now have also an open issue on how we credit social stuff in the all contributors bot, and if winning in a social session or a quiz, whatever was put on, gets you a special shout out. So that is underway, and the one thing that I managed to actually contribute is like shamefully looking at my bio and figuring out how really outdated that was, and adding like a few more sentences about myself and to the contributors file, and having that in. So I don't really have like a specific asks from anyone. Well, I guess if you have thoughts about the scavenger hunt and things, and if you want to take this forward to write it as a section in the Turing Way, please do, and feel free to comment on top of that issue. But as I just learned, apparently it takes you at least 2 or 3 book dashes to actually get the content in that you're like wanted to write. So maybe I just need to already put a hold in my calendar for November and come back to get my road mapping in. So yeah, that's me.
Congratulations, Patricia. This is a lovely piece of work, and I was really sorry to miss the scavenger hunt myself, but from everything I heard around, I'm pretty sure that we will be hosting more of these sessions in the future, and it was great fun, everyone he said. My thought went straight to what could be missing from the community management operational side, and that's exactly the social aspect of things, and like icebreakers or inclusive games that people can have this space of getting to know each other outside of GitHub pull requests comments. So definitely very valuable in community building. I'm wondering if there are any questions in the room or online. Malvika.
I always have things. Patricia, I really appreciated the way you ran social session. Like, it's one thing to have social session for fun, which is always great, but the way you designed it really got to know people personally, and it was really lovely, and definitely the highlight for me. Yeah, and having like, I guess the other part of the road mapping workshop was very good, but I also think the part you said that there is one thing to provide people with all the resources, other is to train them on how they can facilitate it. I think you have a lot of facilitating experience. I think we might want to think about, if we don't already have, how to facilitate practitioners have kind of workshops, because those are with very senior stakeholders, and engaging them in a way that doesn't feel that we're wasting their time. I think you did so well. That meta practice would be amazing to capture sometime.
Thank you, Malvika. I'm not sure if there was a question in there other than like we should do more work on getting this written up, and like
just a compliment that that the facilitation that you do is really amazing, and I don't know if we can teach everybody how to do that, but we can definitely capture some of that.
Thank you. And I think you and me we have started like on facilitation resources already, and I think we should probably do a bit more of that. I struggle to figure out how to teach things where a lot of the facilitation stuff is just getting comfortable with yourself and in a room full of people. So that's one where I guess we should come back to Book Dash and get people's or a collaboration cafe. I'm not entirely sure if I can make many of those, but I think that is a fun brainstorming session on which of these you can teach people. But yeah, I'm bad at accepting compliments if that isn't obvious, but thank you everyone. Talking about facilitation, Lily, do you want me to take over from here?
I was just thinking about it, and seems like it is a good time. Yeah, if you're okay.
Wonderful. Yeah, I can. Next in the pad we have Jyoti, but I think Jyoti will join in about 10 minutes ish. So we'll keep her updates for later. Danju, you're in the room sitting there. Do you want to reflect about what you have done in this Book Dash?
Yeah, so I'm Danju. I'm a PhD student from Swansea. Yeah, so I have worked on like translation and localization of the book and book. Then we managed to add a new language on the track of the crowding platform. So it's only me at the moment. So the progress is quite slow, but we'll make it through at some point, I guess. Yeah, so we will like slowly translate through a book, I guess. Yeah. That's it, thanks.
That's lovely to hear, Sanju, and I'm really happy that we are going to have resources in Korean now. And I wanted to invite you to our localization translation co-working next week. Do you have that invite? So I sent it to you.
Is it like a onboarding or?
Yes,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
right.
I got it.
Lovely.
Thank you. I mean, that's, yeah, like studying a new language is really nice. And I think in some of the onboarding sessions, we said like if you're doing translation, you're like in for a longer haul as well. So you're not finishing that in one Book Dash, but it is a longer piece of work just to get familiar with the infrastructure that runs all the translation and localization work, and then actually doing the translating bit. Always amazed when people take that on, because even though I'm supposed to be okay in several languages, I've only done work in English, so I would even struggle to translate things into my mother tongue properly because I'm just lacking all the vocabulary in that one. So yeah, Korean is exciting, really, really cool. So yeah, excited to see that come in. Next up, Precious. Precious, are you?
Hold on, Trisha, we've got a question.
I have a question. Oh, two
Oh,
questions.
we have a question, sorry.
So I'm really interested in this. Actually, it sounds like a great idea. I don't think a lot of people I wanted to share this resource who don't speak very good English but speak very good Portuguese, and I couldn't do it. And I never thought, why don't I translate this to them? Why not?
Join us in the
Exactly. So I wanted to ask you, so how slow is slow? I presume you have been using some tools to translate. And I presume, and I did lots of translation before on ChatGPT, was many years ago. So I understand how slow it can be. So I want to know how faster or how much progress you managed to do. Obviously, Korean to English, I think, is probably even more different in terms of kind of the syntax, etc., than Portuguese, which have some similarities. But maybe it is comparable. I don't know. The other thing is, what's your process? What kind of tools you're using and how did you go?
Oh yeah, so we have this platform called Crowding. So it kind of automatically suggests to translate to English to your language, but by sentence by sentence. So it can be like very useful and easy to translate. But on the other hand, even the structure of the paragraph is very different from English to Korean.
Yeah.
So sometimes it makes more sense to merge two sentences into one big sentence. That would like sounds more natural in a way. So then I also have to think about like how like this sentence can be, or the block of paragraph can be translated more naturally. And then I'm not from like literature background, so that is quite thought involved for myself. And then also there's like a lot of terminology in English side, but also in Korean side. So if you think about the Dreamway as a charity perspective, there's like a specific terms you use to describe what's going on or the process inside the charity. And then I have to also like think about what's the correct word to translate. But for this book dash, we were more focused on like making this Korean translation included in the whole workflow instead of like just translating everything. Because I also needed to get used to the Crowding platform, and then I also need to like think about what's like a good tone or how to say like style of like translating like Dreamway documents into Korean. Because I think, so I'm not really familiar with Dreamway handbook yet, but I feel like the Dreamway handbook has very structured design or this structure, a way to say some things. So I need to like respect those structures when I'm like translating. So, but now we have Korean language in the track, so it should be straightforward from now. I can just like.
It's called Crowding.
Yeah, Crowding.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And did you start from the beginning of the book, or did you have a particular chapter? How did you? Because it's so massive.
Yeah, so there's also like a priority marked on the text. So then like the most priority one was like welcome section, and also afterwards. So I've started from there. Also, I guess you can just choose from wherever you want because it's very large.
This was marked in a previous book dash, or is there it's a guidance from the Dreamway?
There's a I'm sharing the chapter with you. It's like this chapter, yeah. Because in one of the
About translation.
in one of the book dashes, the translation team wrote down their workflow in a chapter. That was one thing that they did, yeah, and there's some criteria images and things, so there's a whole workflow. And I had another question, because I remember Batul, who is part of the translation group, one of the things that she has talked about sort of more widely in this area is that in some languages or some areas of the world, they don't have equivalent words for some of the technical terms. So we obviously talk a lot about open research, but that word open research doesn't mean something in different languages. So is that the case in Korean, or do you have because I have to say I have a colleague I work with in Korea, and her students are really, and it is an open research group that we're running together. Her students are really interested in open research, but she hasn't really told me. They're really interested in the videos because we do try and translate them across. But I haven't heard about the terminology, so that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's true, because like even sometimes like I mean, like even if you were to try to translate the same word into like different language, the translation can be differ from the context. So that's
what I'm thinking, because if you say open research is two words, but together, for us that means something, but maybe because I know Batul is talking about Arabic, it just doesn't mean the same thing.
Exactly.
They need to have their own version of that term kind of thing. So
and then also so when we are also like translating something like open research, then we can really translate literally open research as like something in Korean. But and then we like there's So that would be like dictionary, like a translation. But there's also like a, like terminology we just use as it is. Like
Yeah.
when we say like open research, like we can just use open research in Korean as a open research.
Yes.
So then that's also a complicating part, I
Yes.
guess. So that-
Yeah,
how it is
I
at the
understand
moment.
that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that as well. Sometimes you leave it as because I know when I teach like GitHub, I've been told like I haven't taught it in Spanish, but I've taught it with someone who's been teaching it in Spanish, and they don't want to translate the actual things like issue, pull requests. They leave those in the English because obviously you're using the English platform. They'll do like a Spanish translation on the side to say what it does, but they'll leave the actual term as the English term. So yeah, translation is very complicated. So
This is kind of thing in the workflow, so there's any comments or about these kind of things, because that was mine.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Have a read of it. So yeah, it's in the community handbook. So thanks. That's great work.
Thank you.
You haven't had a round of applause.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of like individual leadership to start something like this.
Yeah.
It's massive. But I do hope a lot more people will join and we can promote that more with our Korean researchers.
Yeah, lovely. And I love that little sidetrack into linguistics. I think this is one where you can talk for hours to figure out the differences in languages. But now, Precious, are you happy to share what you did and potentially also report on the wider team for Data Science Without Borders that you worked with or that contributed to this book dash?
Yeah, I can. Hi, everyone. My name is Precious. I am the community manager for the Data Science Without Borders project and a member of the planning committee. So I'm going to give my updates, an update of about 4 to 5 people who are currently not able to be here. So I added a case study to the Pathway Creation chapter that Malvika started, and that was merged this morning, so yay. And then I created a list of good first issues to enable easy contributions for people who might be new to BookDash or GitHub and needed something to figure out their way around it. Then on the facilitation side for members of the DSWP project that participated in BookDash, Winston added more information to the paragraph on citizen science in the open scholarship chapter. There's an issue created and he has written out the document. Sarah very thankfully reviewed some of them and even suggested some really cool Scriberia images yesterday. So we'll work together on creating his PR so everybody else can be able to add comments or reviews to them. Serena wrote a chapter on community-centered health research ethics. She created an issue this morning and I shared it on the group. It's up for review, so anybody who has some time can please help me review them and would all see the edits. Anise and Mokhtar translating the open research chapter to French is currently on a Google Doc, but an issue is created. When it's done, Batu let me know of an onboarding next week. So hopefully you'll be able to join it so they can learn how to use Crowdin and transfer their translations from the document to Crowdin. Cyril joined for the last session yesterday and very, very commendably wrote a case study on self-supervised learning to mitigate bias in automated malaria diagnosis to add to the risks of bias in research chapter. So that issue is also linked there. If anybody has some time, please help us to review. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Precious, and the whole team. Are there questions?
I just want to say thank you to Precious because she had a hard task in her being part of our planning committee that she took on facilitating the members of her her other community, or the community that she works in. So thank you so much for bringing that community into our community so that we can work together.
I also want to say, I think Precious is doing community management for a community where people are not familiar with open spaces and they don't feel very comfortable just being and showing up and talking about things. Sorry, we're booked for full day. There is a system check problem. You'll have to check with reception. So she has had so many one-on-ones, and I had nothing to do with it, which is great. I was on holiday, but sad for Precious, she had to do all of these things. I think it is really fantastic that Precious is building that bridge between Data Science Without Borders and here. I think we also experienced that these members had internet issues and the tools that we use isn't really appropriate for them. So Precious was making sure that these people were talking to her on Discord and WhatsApp, and like, I can't even imagine how Precious managed that. So really huge shout out to you, Precious. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And I guess if you have like a quick thoughts on lessons learned for the next book dash, how we how organizers can take that into account. So not all of that is on you, and more can be actually designed into how to run the book dash. I think that would be really, really nice, because I struggle to think of good solutions because we're so used to Zoom, Slack, and GitHub now that like creativity for anything else, or like just the knowledge of what works better isn't there. So like yeah, and we have a question in the Slack. Is Discord better for low bandwidth than Slack, or is that just a platform that people were more familiar with and using already?
It's the low bandwidth. The Zoom is not great. Even for like audio, it requires a lot of internet. So for example, Serena even struggled with actually WhatsApp. Like her internet was so poor that even WhatsApp calls weren't working for her. So some of our members are, for example, I think Serena joined from Douala or Senegal. It really depends where they're joining from, right? Like if they are in the institution, it's fine. Exactly. Yeah. So and also like the other part of it is like culture. In DSWP, people are not used to turning on their videos because internet, but also it's not like, they enjoy seeing people, but they don't feel comfortable showing their face unless they're in like small groups. So I think the breakout rooms definitely help. I don't think we have like good solution for it, but maybe we could try to do like Slack-based support for people who can't join call or something like that.
I was thinking that maybe have specific channels like the breakout groups, so people can be in those channels.
I mean, they can be
Can they use the huddle on Slack?
I
like the
haven't
audio?
tried, but
I
also
wonder if
Discord
that's-
has.
Oh, Discord as
also
well.
has,
Yeah. But I think Ariel's question, it was like, is Discord better than Slack, or are they similar?
Precious can answer that.
Well, it is a little similar, but I think for like open science communities, we have heard, anyway, I have heard some of the members say they're more familiar with Discord than using Slack for like open science communities. So it's also the platform that we make use of.
Yeah, that's fair. So it's more about familiarity of that than the bandwidth. It's just Zoom, and I assume that other conferencing apps would be the same, really. If Zoom is bad, it's probably all of them are pretty bad.
Yeah, it's good to learn though what other people are using, and figuring out how we could bring that in. But yeah, thank you, Precious. Great work. Tons of content from the whole Data Science Without Borders team. So I hope we find some people that can review that and get that into the book, because that all sounds super exciting. Right, who's still here that can report out. Malvika, I think you're the only
Reshma
person.
Reshma was, yeah, okay, when Reshma joined, I want to say that I have been kind of taking advantage of people being in the room, so grabbing Ariel to make sure that we have fireside chat, which is something that we want to do for rest of the year. So I will show you, I will share my screen, so it's not just me talking, and it comes with explicit asks, so be prepared. So we have come up with, we're partnering with Software Sustainability Institute to host our series of fireside chats. Here are the topics and months. What we did is to finalize the speakers. We reached out to them. People who have confirmed their names are already displayed. We have also dates for a few, if not everything. Ariel and I will support this, but we also want other people to join us as co-facilitator and scribe. These topics are, to me, extremely interesting, but I can imagine that some of you may find it boring, but some of you might be just interested to learn about it. If you are the latter one, definitely come along, because that helps us suggest better questions for our speakers. And most speakers we're inviting are quite experienced in community governance, and they're just interested in talking about governance from their own perspective. The purpose of these series are twofold. One is to inform our own steering committee by exposing them to different communities that have gone through similar challenges we will be facing. And second is to expose SSI fellows and other people who are relatively early in their project to define governance to a bit more complicated conversation that you would generally not have in open science training. So yeah, join us, would be awesome. It is planned for until end of the year. So if next few months doesn't work, you also have a chance to pick one in the later stage. And then we would be finishing it with November Book Dash. And we hope that the learnings from previous fireside chats can be documented into a reference guide for other people. Very exciting for me, because fireside chat had been sleeping for a while. Then last week at the Collaboration Cafe and the Collaboration Workshop with Jim, we started working on documenting how to curate pathways. So we created chapters on infrastructure pathway, like technical details around how to add pathway. But also we added landing page for why pathway, how have we created this, and then I have described how to support other people in creating pathway. And then Precious talked about the other chapter that she helped write by capturing case studies from Data Science Without Borders, where we curated pathway. So all of these are in there. The purpose for us to talk about it is that we want to encourage a lot more people to start curating as many pathways as possible. Mostly because I'm really worried that the chapters, for example, what Richard was showing, they're so rich, but if people are not looking for it, they would just never look for it. So having curated pathways like Early Career Researchers, which was developed with Data Study Group, we could find 10 to 15 chapters that we think all early career researchers should know. And we hope that when they're reading this, they can also come across other chapters that they get interested in. So this is something I really care about, and we spent since 2021 a lot of time in making this operationalized, and I see now it's picking up. So take advantage of the synergy. And then to finish it off, I just want to thank all the committee members for doing what you all do. I mean, it's just a pleasure to join the sessions and learn about people. Although I wasn't always online, I think I just struggle with my own mental capacity. I really enjoyed blocking out my time and writing some of the things. Hopefully in the later share out, I'll share the partnership model chapter that will help you advocate for Turing Way partnership for your organization. Thanks.
Wonderful, Malvika. Are there any questions? other than, can you remind people again what exactly facilitating a fire chat entails? So
Yeah, so Fireside Chat are, I have to say, they were inspired by lateral governance project that Code for Science and Society, Rea El-Zain, had designed. And I really liked it because, you know, you often get, here is the introduction to open science conversation, or here is all the very complicated conversation. People kind of forget this messy in between part. And Fireside Chat for me was to make sure that we talk about that messy in between part without trying to find solution, but just to have different communities to come together and talk about same topic. And we had some really good Fireside Chats. One of the things we didn't do before was to document lessons from them, which is what we are trying to solve with this one. The facilitation requires, there's a role, of course, there's a chapter on it and it describes what roles and responsibilities people have. But the main facilitation is that we want facilitators to also be active contributor to discussion. We want them to share their own experiences, but they also kind of make sure that people, all the speakers in the call have had the chance to speak, that nobody is hogging the whole room, that people's questions are being addressed. So it's like all the general stuff, but also not feeling too overwhelmed. Therefore, we always have two facilitators. So while one person is talking, the other person can take care of Zoom or from a pad. There are lots of really beautiful, but one of my most favorite one is the one actually Patricia had designed with Maya Sundukova and Irini Zorba, which was about burnout and mental health. I have gone back to that conversation so many times. So if you want to start somewhere, that would be my recommendation. But there are other really beautiful conversations that I actually listen to when I have to prepare a presentation to remind myself of some of the tiny details that I think are important, but we forget when we are talking about them. So they're good reference resources. It doesn't really, it just go, you'll have to read the chapter because all the technical details are in there.
thank you. Thank you for people that add the links as well to those chapters. So yeah, if you're then basically if you're not super familiar with the topic but want to learn scribing, seems to be a really good option to get involved. But also if there's a topic that you have opinions on, this is the part to get in as a facilitator. We have a super interesting conversation in the chat that continues about like Slack being really bandwidth intensive, people providing a few nice low bandwidth options, but we still have the thing of like whatever people are familiar with. I tried to move some of that into the Etherpad because I think it's really important to capture and to think about those bits for any future book dashes or any other events that we design, that we want to be really inclusive and have a wide range of contributions. I think that means everyone who's still physically or in the Zoom room and has been part of the book dash has been able to share out. There are a few people that have put updates in there but aren't here to talk about themselves. Now, question to the people who do this more often, do we talk on their behalf or do we figure out if they manage to attend the second share out and then provide the update themselves?
I think we wait to see if they'll attend the second one, because they put their notes in there, and we'll see if they attend the next one so they can share it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think the only thing left to do, Patricia, is obviously to say thank you to everyone that has attended, and well done everybody for all the amazing work you have done in 2 short days, which I think is quite amazing actually. I think it's made us be more focused actually on finishing off all these bits and pieces and maybe starting stuff that we can bring across into collaboration cafes and other book dashes. But the very last thing is just to remind everyone who has attended the book dash that we do have a feedback form, well, feedback Framapad actually, which is on line of this Framapad 250. And it did say it needed updating, but I just checked, it is all looks all good to me. So please do put your pluses and deltas, so pros and cons of the book dash. And I'll just say that being in the planning committee myself and the working group, we do look at feedback. I know some people don't look at their feedback, but we do look at it and we do actually use it for the planning of our next book dashes. So we really do like to get feedback from everyone who has attended. And yeah, I think we can wrap up and just say thank you. The last thing was we haven't taken a picture. We should have taken a picture earlier. So if we can take a picture now.
If we stop the recording first.
We can stop the
then
recording. Yeah, I know you can edit it anyway. Yeah, let's stop the recording. There we go. So if you want to be